streaming. And then I would like to admit everyone else. And I would like to record. And that will be it. Okay. So first of all, welcome again of the second. And then I would like to admit everyone else. Well, wait. And I would like to record. Bunu kapa. Sorry about the disturbance. Thank you very much again for being here with us. We have Yiorgis Yerolymbos here. He's a very old friend of mine. It's been a lot of years right now, right? So we have met during 2004 when we were in a workshop. And I was busy with my PhD, and Yiorgis was studying in his second bachelor degree, right? Am I right? So yeah. He was studying architecture, and actually this is interesting because I have mentioned a lot about you to my students. For example, the ones who would like to do something else than architecture. And I was always giving you as an example that you have majored in two different subjects and then combined them in order to do something that you love and which made the basis of your success as well, I think. Yerolymbos is a photograph artist, and he's a master, as in my opinion, in terms of building photographies. I have very some of his works as well. Well, may I ask to mute, by the way, our guests, please, so that we can have a proper sound here. So, okay, this is from Greece.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi. So we have many guests tonight, 47, 48 right now. So I was talking about Yiorgis, and then I never thought that this friendship would last so long. But right now, as a colleague, I'm so happy to have you as a friend and being able to invite you. You have been in Yiorgis.
Σας ακούμε. Ακούμε κάποια φωνή. Αν μπορείτε να το μειώσετε, παρακαλώ.
Okay.
Εμπρός.
Okay. Now, I have unmuted everyone.
Thank you.
Everyone. So, well, I had prepared a nice speech, but I think I am excited as well. So tonight is my honor to present you Yiorgis Yerolymbos, because I've always wanted to invite you in person in our school to give the examples of your projects, of your works, and inspire our students. And this is how it should be. I mean, we should be having a cup of coffee before we start this evening, and then talk and chat, etc. But right now, this is just a screen, and I hope that we can invite you in person as well, so that you can meet our students, meet our researchers, and inspire them also in person. Now I will the stage is yours now, and at the end we will have an opportunity to chat and ask you questions, I hope. Thank you very much for being here tonight, everyone. So let's start with you, Yiorgis. Yiorgi Bey, okay.
So hi to all. As Pinar, who is, as she said, a great friend of mine for so many years. I had the great fortune in my life to to have a number of degrees and sit in a number of lectures, different kind of lectures, different kind of talks, presentations, different formats and different languages. And honestly, from all the different ways of giving a lecture or listening to one, the one that I really preferred was what I call the Anglo-Saxon one. It is where a person arrives in a podium or in a screen with a glass of whiskey, usually. I just have water, I'm afraid, and extends his, or has thanks and apologies, and then raises his hand and no notes, nothing, and says, I will try to prove point E. This is my conclusion. And in order to do that, I will start from point A. I will then go to point B, from point B to C. When I'm in point D, I will deviate a little bit, D1, D2, go back in track and follow with my conclusion. To a mind like mine, this person just gave me the blueprint. He gave me the sketch. Whether I was tired as an audience, whether I was not interested, I knew the path that he would take, and therefore I could follow him or find him again. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. That's exactly what I'm trying to do tonight. So I will try to persuade myself, and if possibly you, that a person's narrative, a person's point of view is gradually built, project by project, brick by brick. Things get gained at every single project and being added up one on top of the other, thus creating, let's say, an arsenal, a way of a toolbox with which one, if lucky, in the end of that path, can approach far bigger scale and tackle issues that he would be absolutely incapable of in the beginning. That's basically what I'll try to do. How little by little I managed to create my voice, my narrative, in order to be able to look at the big cities, at the huge scale, especially the city of Athens in a number of projects. I'll show you two. And I will conclude with the largest and most significant project that I had in my life, the creation of the Renzo Pianos Stavros Niarchos Foundation Cultural Center in Athens, a project that took 10 years, a decade of my life, from June 2007 to February 2017. That's it. That said, may I thank you all for being here. May I thank the International Center of Urban Studies and of Yiorgis Technical University. May I thank Pinar for her kind and honoring invitation. And may I extend to all of you my apologies. I'm not as prepared as I wish. The quarantine, especially with young children, is a very difficult thing to do. And I will try not to bore you or tire you. So I will be, here we are. I will be speaking about frame, about light, about traces, grid, axis, vertical as well as horizontal, about metaphor, abstraction. I will show you some of my references. I will talk about the whole against the dot, how many dots create the whole. And last but not least, I will mention scale, which is what you are all here for, scale. So by definition, I would like to start with a definition. What is it that I do? What is landscape photography? What is photography of architecture? And you're very, very lucky, all of us, that a far more eloquent and far more intelligent person than myself gave a brilliant definition of what landscape photography, architectural photography is. The great Robert Adams. He is now in his 80s, quite old, but still going on. A Colorado-based American photographer. Robert Adams said that photography brings us three verities: geography, autobiography, and metaphor. What a photographer traditionally tries to do is to bring past, present, and future in one shoe. Now, let's put it to the test. Let's see if that is the case. Let's start with the basics. Frame. Every single photograph ever taken is unique. If we were all seated next to each other and had exactly the same camera, pointed exactly at the same direction, we would produce far different photographs, I assure you, and let me prove it. Many, many years ago, almost 26, 27 years ago, two photographers found ourselves in Versailles, in France. One of us, the other one, not me, had a specific project to do, wanted to photograph the jardin, the gardens. I tag along. I was just there for, you know, the stroll. In order for me not to, get in the way of my colleague, we gave a rendezvous and said, in 3 hours, I'll meet you in the entrance. And we never met. During 3 hours, nothing. We never saw each other. Now, when we went back and developed the films, we got to see this. Do you see my cursor? The cursor, right. Please have a look at this point. This, the one of my colleague produced this photograph, and I am showing you this part because it shows clearly where the photographer is positioned. Okay, it's very, very precise. And the other photographer, me, took that shot. Again, please have a look at this one. My point is that both of us, without even knowing, stayed at exactly the same position, put our feet on the ground, and produced two completely different photographs. One is talking about the gardens, and the other one is talking about despair or boredom. And this is my first point. Every photograph is unique. It is a self-portrait. It will always show who you are. So frame, that's the first one. Light, that's the second element. Many, many years ago, during my first degree, as Pinar accurately mentioned, I started being interested in photographing buildings. And in Selanik, where I come from, in Thessaloniki, one of the most beautiful buildings started being built. So I followed its construction during the time that it was completely empty. It was the last time that the museum was closed and the building was on site, not the artifacts. So I loved this and followed. And quite fast, I understood that basically my whole thing would be to follow light in different parts, follow it. And it was like a jazz music. One part got lit. It was like it played its solo and then moved to the background, and another place was lit up again and again. I just had to follow this. And during this stroll in an empty museum, I picked up another element, the human presence. Every single time that I went to that place, the guard, the security guard, looked at me and just picked up and left. He didn't want to be photographed. So I followed him again and again and again, never made it, absolutely never, never. But I got it. You don't need to show a person in order to talk about a person. You can talk about a person by all of the things that you include in a photograph, a chair or a clock. Trace, human trace. And with that in mind, I went to Great Britain, to the UK, and started my master's degree there. And boy, I have missed the sea. Coming from a seashore city as you are, after 6 months in London, I got so tired of not being able to see the sea. I got sick, really, I got sick. So my tutors had pity on me, and they told me, get on a train and go to Dover. You will see the sea there. And that's exactly when I unlocked and I started taking photographs of the English coast. I walked around England, not the Great Britain, England, the southern part of the UK, okay? And walked again and again, every single shore from Sheerness-on-Sea, which is on the west of London, to St. Ives in Cornwall, and so on and so forth. And that, number of trips, gave me another element, which was the metaphor. How you can talk about the human experience with insinuation. The photograph I show you shows a quite permanent human trace, steps and a human altered landscape. But sometimes it got to my understanding that the human altered landscape is just something that lasts for minutes, like my own, steps in a Penzance Bay, steps that were completely, disappeared a few minutes afterwards once the sea came and took them away. Traces then, and metaphor. And then, with that in mind, I came back. And during my, PhD thesis, I had to work on a large-scale work to combine how architecture, civil engineering, and photography can provide an interesting paradigm in order to see public works of large scale in a different way. I photographed the Egnatia road, the one that starts from the Turkish borders and drives through northern Greece, taking lorries and trucks and cars to the Ionian Sea and then the Adriatica through ferry boat. Basically, it follows the old Egnatia, the Roman Egnatia in a modern way. And there I found landscapes of large scale that amazes me, like this one. It is not an amphitheater, mind you. It reminds an amphitheater, a Roman or a Greek, but it is not. It's just public. It's work that needs to keep the side of the road in its place. Sometimes it had some locality, like this one, compared to an amphitheater, and some other times absolutely nothing. It was an international kind of landscape that you can find everywhere, from Germany to South Korea, you name it. The highway landscape that you can find literally everywhere, kind of in the same way. So, in that homogeneous kind of landscape, how can you survive? How can you find interest? Well, my discovery was that by looking at it in an allegoric way, in a metaphor, as I mentioned. This is not a bridge. Of course it is a bridge, but it is not seen as a bridge. It is seen in a way that resembles, at least vaguely, to a boat. And this kind of continuous narrative where you see one thing but you interpret it in a different way gave me a number of opportunities to see the eternal landscape. You can see Mount Athos on the background with a very trivial one in the background. I would not have taken the photograph had it been just one of the two. I wanted the juxtaposition of the two. Or the painting road. Okay, this is just asphalt. What intrigued me is that by accident, of course by accident, the road imitated the mountains in the background. The road tried to imitate, the human construction tried to imitate the natural one. It had a religious kind of interest as far as I'm concerned. And once I mentioned religious comment, I'm not a religious person, mind you, but you can find this kind of sentiment even in a tunnel, even in a phone booth, because that's exactly what I'm showing you right now. This is a phone booth under construction. I followed the construction of this road for around 4.5 years. And by the end, I got to understand a number of issues surrounding large scale, brick by brick. Again, as I said, I started framing differently. I started paying attention to light. I started using traces and using metaphor again and again in my work. And once you have done that, you start creating a very solid base for you to see everything, even your own apartment, even your own building, the one that you live. You just need to change, the angle. Just look up, and the staircase of any building start to show interest. You just need to give it a go. You need to give it a chance. The reason for me showing you this photograph is that it brought to me one more element, which is the sense of base in photography. If you see right here, you will see that this photograph is very well balanced because of this trapezium, if I pronounce it correctly in English, this base that creates a very solid base. And this can be found literally everywhere. It is, it is perspective everywhere. Everywhere you go, you can find this kind of solid base where a photograph is based, and then it gives some time to the viewer to understand what's happening and start noticing other stuff, like the axis. A grid has basically two axes, a vertical and a horizontal one. Let's start with horizontal. I chose this one because, again, it is directed towards your country. It is a photograph I took in Mytilene, looking towards Turkey under moonlight. It is a night shot. This, after so many years in construction site and in dirt and in mud, it was a need for me to get out and just see something simpler, just one line in the horizon, blue after London and so on and so forth, so that it was a need. And once you start, tuning your eyes towards that, you see it again and again and again and again in a number of landscapes. Now, I mentioned a grid, so let's make it more interesting. Let's talk about the horizontal, the vertical one. I am always intrigued by this kind of landscapes, which can be found everywhere, at least in my country. There is no law in Greece that demands of the person who has done this to take it back to its previous condition. There is no law that can persuade somebody who has done something illicit to bring it down and take it back to nature. This landscape will forever be like this. It will never go back. It will never advance. It is, let's say, a temple of stupidity, I might add, probably, or greed. Again, somebody who wanted to do something without giving any damn to the environment. And I mentioned temple because in my point of view, 10 columns, little down the road, you can find the Parthenon, for example, and it is an international heritage site, whereas this one is just a local one, which can be found in so many copies of identical landscapes, a temple. And with this in mind, please permit me to mention my first hero, who was the person to whom I owe my profession. The first photographer officially being named photographer of architecture, specialized architectural photographer, was the great Frederick Evans. Frederick Evans, for 40 years, his long career from the mid-1900s to the beginning of the 20th century, took this kind of photographs. He photographed only Gothic monuments around Central Europe, the UK and Northern France. That's it. Frontal, no distortions, black and white, no people. He single-handedly created the genre I follow in architectural photography. And after 40 years, a few years before he, and always gave a caption which was completely topographical. The name of the temple, the name of the place, and the date, nothing else. Temple of Ely, Sussex, 1872, that's it, for 40 years. And 2-3 years before his retirement, in old age, he produced this image. And instead of giving it a topographical caption, he named it A Sea of Steps. Now, for the first time, In architecture photography, we have geography, autobiography, and metaphor. And this created a number of paths. The French Eugène Auger, during the same years, the beginning of the 20th century, started looking at the first megacity, the first huge for its time city, Paris. He produced photographs where on each and every one of them, you could see the inscription, "Ça va disparaître." This is going to disappear. So he started collecting photographs of places that he knew, or at least he thought so, that they would not be there a few years later. And this is not just a European phenomenon. The Americans picked it up quite fastly. The great Alfred Stieglitz photographed the beginning of the 20th century, New York City. And Dorothea Lange, a great female photographer, photographed New York from above. Dorothea Lange was the first photographer that was commissioned, the first woman photographer commissioned to photograph the construction of the Chrysler building. This is a great mistake of mine. I'm talking about Berenice Abbott, not Dorothea Lange. I'm so sorry, Berenice Abbott. And another colleague of hers, Louis Hine, photographed the construction of the Empire State Building. You might not know his name, Louis Hine, but you certainly know this photograph. So another part came and was added to what I was talking about. Construction sites, they became a thing. Nobody was interested up until that point. No construction was considered, worthy of being noticed. And that's an extremely important part, because this is where the game changed. People said, wait a minute. Not only the natural environment is worthy of taking photographs, our everyday environment is worthy of noticing and discussing. And so, in the beginning of the 20th century, with the modern movement, a number of photographers, Walker Evans, I'm showing you the great Walker Evans, started shifting attention towards buildings or billboards. This is a great breakthrough. We are talking about somebody photographing an interpretation of. I mean, it gets denser and denser. The great Ed Ruscha in the 60s says, okay, what I find very interesting is gas stations. And the great Louis Balch, along with Frank Golke, I don't want to drop more names, but they form a pact called Minutopographics, 10 photographers, who say basically where we live is far more important than where we visit, thus putting the human construction, the human effect on the environment in place, in discussion, not outside. And that, of course, brings a number of topics of interest. The very notion of what landscape is changed completely. One of my favorites, one of my heroes is Stephen Shaw, who did this brilliant photograph. Again, we're talking about the interpretation of landscape. That's hilarious, and at the same time, it is, as far as I'm concerned, very, very clever. And then things, got expanded to everything, roads, infrastructure. I'm showing you Margherita Spilutini, a Swiss photographer. The very notion of what is beautiful or interesting took another path, even to extremes, and not, again, just in the Western part of the world. I'm not talking about just the United States or Central Europe. Let's go to Hong Kong. In his incredible work, Michael Wolff, called the Density of Cities, if I'm not, Density of Architecture, provided this kind of photographs, which literally amaze me. He's one of my main references. There is no Photoshop involved in this. I kid you not, these are real environments. And again, it raised a number of questions, because now politics get into place. It's not just the frame, nor the light, or a metaphor, or a grid. You start discussing other issues like, okay, I love to photograph it, but would I love to live in it? So it gets, it opens a discussion about aesthetics, about how photography aestheticizes things. It makes them look more beautiful than they actually are, and so on and so forth. I won't tire you anymore with this. But again, summing up, a Japanese photographer followed the construction of the deconstruction of a stadium. It's not a football stadium, it's a baseball stadium in Tokyo, and its transformation little by little to city housing, thus creating a very interesting portfolio of how cities, especially of this size, change constantly and according to their needs, and how things disappear and other things appear in their position. And with that in mind, I would like to go back to what I've been discussing. I was fortunate enough in 2008 to travel to the United States with a Fulbright scholarship, driving from coast to coast and back. It took me 2 months, during which I just stayed the night in certain motels. I drove for 61 days. And in the beginning, I was humbled by New York. How on earth could I photograph New York, the most photographed city in the world? And how could I, tackle this huge scale, the very definition of a megacity? And the solution I found was to start resizing it. You see, in this photograph, I managed to make it look smaller in my eyes by creating a union between the trees and the buildings. I brought it down to my level, little by little. And once you've done that, you get another tool, which is scale, to discuss any kind of landscape, especially the American one. For example, rural ones, or again, going back to the New York one. And the element that surprised me was the element of the dot. I will talk about the dot, a small point compared with the whole, okay? How small dots like pixels create a larger image, how to bring it down to that. Because in New York, you can find this literally everywhere. Again, I say I was amazed. First time I was in New York, I was in awe. And then I started getting cocky. And by cocky, I mean I started taking risks. This photograph is taken at 3 o'clock in the morning, and minus 12 Celsius degrees or something. I freezed, and I got even bolder. And I'm very happy that I'm here to discuss. I got in Central Park during night, which was a mistake, and something that I will never done again. Okay, but thank God I'm here now. So with that in mind, I rented the car and off I went. I went to south to Washington, where you do remember, I was lodged at my good friend Telling during night, and then went due west. And then all the references of my heroes, of my photographers kicked in, everything along with what I had already with me, like the elements that I've been talking about. I started looking at a different kind of landscape that was nowhere to be found in my, in the place where I was growing up. So this kind of huge landscape started intriguing me. And I say intriguing because I found similarities between different structures, accommodating different needs. Let me give you an example. This is a multi-story parking lot. This is a parking for cars of many, many, many stories. On the other hand, this is a parking for people. This is an elderly people. I don't know the word, is where people go to spend their last period of time in Florida. Sorry?
Senior home.
Senior homes. Thank you, Pinar. I was amazed by the same kind of, people and things being piled up in huge blocks that, consummate the face of all the beaches of Pensacola, Florida. And I traveled all this distance and got so fed up. So when I found myself in the West, and especially in magical Utah, the sense of scale just, was breathtaking. I'm not just interested in how beautiful it was. I was interested in how this landscape transcended. And I'm saying I'm not interested in beauty because, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. You can find beauty everywhere, really. In a no-name highway in Kansas, where for 3 or 4 days, the tallest thing in the horizon was me. Nothing. I mean, absolutely flat land for three days in a row. That was a travel. That was a trip that made a huge impact in me, because I had decided not to have a cell phone, and so I was able to be on my own for 60 days with no interference, nothing. I was able to, write things down, work, and find myself again after a period where I was really, really lost. So I end this portfolio with the Death Valley photograph, which again, it signifies, as far as I'm concerned, this vastness of the American size and scale, and yet a way forward, how one finds oneself. Again, as I said, brick by brick. Now, I've mentioned scale again and again and again, and this is my final point before I get to the city portfolios as well as the Yiorgis one. And I mentioned scale because I think it is of vital importance for the understanding of any photograph. Right now, we all see this photograph in a completely different way. I know what it is, therefore I see it in a different way than any of you who might have a different sense of what it is. It's a square, or it is a pavement, or it's a detail. It doesn't really matter. We see it differently. How will we see it in the same way? We will do that the moment scale will be set by a human being, by a human. The moment the user of this space arrives in the conversation, that's it. Scale is set. Let me show you. Now it is a square. Should I do that again? Or are we empty? And so once the protagonist arrive in the scene, then all rules are clear for everybody. Even if people in the squares think that they are not alike, they are not similar. They are. Many years ago, we had a huge catastrophe in Greece. We had a huge fire in the Peloponnese, and it was extremely tragic. Many people died in flames, and it amazed me that only 7 and 10 days later, they had rallies because of coming elections, where people cheered and waved the parties' flags, 10 and 7 days after a huge national catastrophe. And that was very, very strange, very, very discomforting, especially when you see that they are not so much different than each other. These are the two major parties. At the time, we had two major parties. I'll show that again, who, anyway, celebrated the leaders a very, very, a very small period of time after we were in grief. And so with that new element, the political side of a photograph, not just the aesthetical one, I started looking at my city and the city of Athens in a different way, not just a landscape one, but again, a more complex landscape that has other issues that should be addressed. Now, if you remember, if not, it's not important. I showed you a photograph of the Mount Athos, and I said that I would not have taken the photograph had it been just one of the two, the eternal landscape of the beautiful mountain, or the piece of garbage in the foreground. I started photographing Athens with that in mind. Acropolis, which is celebrated by World International Heritage, will always be there. But I wanted to start discussing what is around it. And I started climbing on rooftops and taking photographs of Athens vistas from high viewpoints. And I was amazed. Can I draw your attention to this part? If I do a zoom in, you will see a couple of people walking on the roof. It's not a roof. It's the slab. The last story. And I got to learn that these people do the walk up there every afternoon, because the place that this building is situated is so steep and so difficult to use the public space that they can't get out of the building so easily. So they use the rooftop to have a stroll. And once this starts boiling in my mind, I start noticing it in other places as well. I photograph quite early in the morning. May I direct your attention to the left-hand side here? A very, very hot night in August, Athens. If I zoom in, you find people in their small cell. So I understood little by little that this is what a city is. Small environments, small habitats that one next to the other create a huge one. Small cells, small dots, small pixels that one next to the other create the whole picture. And this is the way I was dictated by my subject to start photographing. As I wanted to have a huge detail, to be able to go very, very close, zoom in every photograph, I understood that one shot will not do the thing. I had to take a number of shots and stitch them together. So I started creating photographs that are constituted by 33 photographs, 3 rows of 11 photographs. Let me prove it. These are the photographs, the one next to the other. If you can see that, 3 rows of 11 photographs each, one stitched to the other, thus creating mural photographs that can be printed very, very big, but photographs that when you close in, when you go in very, very close, you can see people in the living rooms watching TV or just doing the dishes, or again, this was a gift given to me by my subject itself. And so I did. I photographed Athens Again, I made a strategy. I found all the possible places that I had to have access from, and I started looking at Athens again and again, night and day, in different circumstances, and in different parts. I was amazed by the scale and the grid, and I produced, I would say a full portfolio of Athens in that way, discussing this huge density, like Wolf, but in Athens, the density of the architecture in Athens as it was built from the 60s onwards. May I just say that Athens took its current form around the 60s and the 70s, where many people from the countryside poured in the city center. As a result, half of the population of my country resides in Athens. Half of us live in Athens. And we had a discussion with Pinar the other day, and for me it is very interesting because all of us living in Athens, we love to talk bad about Athens, yet we decided to live here. So this, in my mind, creates an oxymoron, or at least starts a discussion within me, because I considered myself as part of the equation. I'm not an outsider. This kind of landscape, this kind of urban landscape is my making as well, is my responsibility as well. If there is somebody to blame for its poor quality, I cannot exclude anybody from it. And it seems quite easy for me to just point a finger and show at other people's actions and omitting our own. But coming back to the abstraction that I've mentioned, once I've made a substantial number of these photographs, there was something missing. And the thing that I found was missing was abstraction. I wanted to make it even more minimalistic, even less, to quote Miss van der Rohe, less is more. So I was very fortunate enough that for every 2 or 3 years, we have a very interesting natural phenomenon. The Egyptian sand from the Sahara Desert visit the southern part of Greece. Usually it remains to the level of Crete or southern Peloponnese, but sometimes if the south wind is stronger, it gets to Athens. So I had 3 opportunities to photograph Athens nowhere, as I call it. So this brought again a new element to the ones I had already gathered. I started looking at the same city in a different cloak, in a different gown, a very, very pale one. And again, in the stage of my path, I wanted to tone it down, to start discussing this kind of landscape that amazes me, that interests me very much in a different way. And I had the opportunity. So what remains is, again, one more opportunity with this kind of natural phenomenon for me to conclude this portfolio. I have to admit, it worked quite well, allegorically, metaphorically as well. And that, because during a decade now, we have passed a horrendous economic collapse. I'm sure you know. So this loss of path, this loss of direction was quite present in our lives. And as far as I'm concerned, it gave me the opportunity to visualize this sentiment, to discuss this with this kind of photographs. Athens nowhere. Now, fog or sand is not always bad. As I mentioned in the beginning, I'm not an Athenian born and bred. Athens is my choice. I am one of the million people who decided to come to Athens to live and work. I originally come from Thessaloniki, and there in Thessaloniki, which cannot be discussed as a mega city, it's a small city or a medium-sized city, no problem at all. There, fog signifies a completely different sentiment. When fog arrives in Thessaloniki, and it is quite, it's not rare, it happens from time to time, all our verities disappear. And in Thessaloniki, because of the seafront, you know always where you're headed. So when there is fog, you completely lose yourself. You have no idea of sense of direction. And this is a sentiment which is quite uplifting. We love it because we find ourselves in a completely unknown environment. The most known environment, even briefly, becomes something completely different, and we celebrate it as such. And I'm showing you this photograph because it's one of my favorite places where from having architectural photography on one end and art photography on the other, I think I can argue that with these two photographs, I attempted to bridge the gap, to even touch a visual kind of poetry in the same place and in the same time. And as I mentioned place, permit me to conclude with a place that has been carved inside me for the rest of my life, a place that I gave it everything. I'm talking about the Stavros Niarchos Foundation Cultural Center in the seafront of Athens, designed by the great Renzo Piano and his team, the Renzo Piano Building Workshop. As I mentioned, I was fortunate enough, and I had also the responsibility, a stressful responsibility, to document its creation for 10 years. The photograph I'm showing you right now was taken on June 5th, 2007. And 10 beautiful years later, we managed to go from this to this. Now, for the better part of 10 years, I have spent nights and days. I have seen this building in all possible weather condition, alone, in freezing cold, or surrounded by thousands of people, something that I'm not sure that will ever happen again with what we are going through right now. I have been there nights and days, as I said, seen its beautiful architecture, interior and exteriorly, managed to create more than 75,000 photographs, out of which only 1 in 10 was handed out, was delivered due to very high protocol and quality standards of the foundation. You're looking at the main stage of 1,400 people. The city center constitutes of 2 institutions, the National Opera and the National Library of Greece, one next to the other. Something that I find incredible, to follow the great Jane Jacobs and her book, The Great Life and Death of American Cities. The theory of mixed uses. A library is alive from morning to night, and an opera starts functioning during night. So you have a constant flow of people, something that a big city desperately needs. You don't need to have black areas, no light or closed for a number of hours during the day, or a smaller scene. And I will permit me to show you this one because I found it intriguing. It's the back of the stage, things that the average spectator will never see. The technicians were kind enough to create this small rooftop for me to photograph. I spend afternoons just watching the sun, and sometimes very, very early in the morning, waiting for the light to come. By the way, this is my sea of steps, okay? Sea of asphalt. This is my metaphor for the sea in just a concrete pavement. During the first years, it was considered a place during which very few people were to be found there, me being one of them. The plans had to be drawn, and the treaties, everything had to be drawn. So at a certain point in 2011, on a beautiful morning, on a Tuesday, at 7 o'clock in the morning, we broke ground. And from that point onward, the place was ceased to be called a place, and it became a construction site. And when a construction site comes into play, rules come again. It has to be fenced, everybody has to abide by rules, wear a helmet, follow restrictions, and so forth. And with all of these restrictions and fencing and rules, of course, the basic element of creation, of a construction site and creation per se, the people came. In its high day, we had 5,500 people, 5,500 people in the construction site. It was a village. It was a small city from all over the world, from Bangladesh and Pakistan to everywhere, really. I mean, you name it. I've met probably all of them. I had exchanged, a kind word with everyone. They helped me, all of them. They opened, stuff that I would miss otherwise. They have taken me everywhere in the building, even its basement, where very, very few people were, managed to set foot. This was because of the unlimited support and friendship of all the people in the construction site, notably the workers. And I was fortunate enough to follow this construction site, this building, from its foundations, when it was, its birth, it's in its first steps in the world. I was, able to follow and photograph and capture for future records its transition. I was fortunate enough to photograph its ephemeral landscapes that existed for a few weeks, for example, like this, scaffolding, or landscapes that existed for minutes, just seconds, like these flying olive trees. 1,400 olive trees, and they flew. I have followed this construction brick by brick, path by path, and seen all these huge changes. And to be perfectly honest, absolutely honest, the most striking change, as far as I'm concerned, was the most quiet one, the one that we never understood how we got from point A to point B. Let me show you what I mean. How we got from this to this, and how during our first soft opening we got to this, when we were expecting something like 30,000 people showing up. No, 165,000 people showed up, thirsty of this public space that we lack in Athens. But from all the 1,000 photographs that were shot during this decade, the bulk of images, the portfolio of images that is closer to my heart, is not the how should I say, the depiction photographs, but it is when these beautiful, beautiful machines, the tower cranes, arrived in the construction site. We had 11 from all sorts of heights. Smaller one was about 30 meters. The highest one, it went around 120 meters. And it was the joy of my life to climb, physically, naturally climb in all of them. So permit me to take you with me. We will attach ourselves to these lines and we will fly over the construction site. May I just point out, it is redundant now, and I know back in the day, there were no drones. We didn't have drones. This is before drone time. Now things are different. I expect it and I appreciate it and fine. But at the time, there were no drones. So you had to physically go up. And I'm discussing this because the moment I got up there, everything became abundantly clear. To the photographer in me, the images were incredible. And the architect in me understood. I got it. I saw, a plan shot. I managed to understand flows, functions, how the buildings work with each other, where's the space, where's, light came from my my warehouse, the one that I've mentioned. Frame and light started creating a new visual narrative. Little by little, I started being more precise and more accurate because the building demanded it. The building narrated it. When you have such a kind of architecture, when the architect is so strict in his lines, his or her lines, you can't possibly, do something different. You have to follow suit. You have to respect the creator, the first person who has created the environment in front of your eyes. You can't just do whatever you want, arbitrarily, I might add. And that created a certain narrative where I started focusing more and more to the very small dot that being added together creates the whole. Again, as you probably have understood by now, the human scale. Once in the form of the workers, my friends, the people who have created this building with their hands. Once, once the human presence became clear, the scale was set, that's it. And therefore, all of the photographs could be seen in a homogeneous way. The two-dimensional piece of art where the human plays, the protagonistic role, even when they don't work. This is a lunch break. Most of the times they could not care less about me. I hovered on top of them, and as you can see, they were just taking their lunch between 12 and 12:30. They had their thing to do. They could not care less about a madman on a crane. But this created to me a very certain sentiment that I had to repay the loan. Photography had to repay the loan architecture gave it in such a beautiful subject. This is the maximum altitude. This is 120 meters. I got really scared, I have to admit, but the trick is never to lose your eye from the camera. If you have the very bad idea to take the camera out and just understand where you are, then things go south. This is how the process of the process of photographing the construction site took place. I'm just probably, talking to a guy, asking him to walk or just get out of my way or whatever. Now, I spoke about a loan, and I would like to speak a little bit further on this. During all these years in that mega construction site, of huge importance for the city of Athens, of huge importance for local architecture and so forth, it was made quite clear, watching the plans and seeing the model and everything, and of course knowing who Renzo Piano and his team are, it was made clear that once the building was finished, nobody would even dream that there was, back in a day, a time that there was nothing there. And to quote the famous urbanist, town planner, Robert Huet, he said, and that's not mine, that when public space is successful, the spectators, the visitors, think it was always there. They could not imagine that this space existed in a different form. So, with that in mind, I wanted to capture the least possible trace of all these interim stages, which, because of the dynamic of the final product, would perish in memory. They would fade. Nobody would remember them. So what I tried to do again and again and again was to create an archive of all these stages of architecture, the non-important ones, the interim phases, the in-between landscape, before the last official building deems them unnecessary. After all, as my great hero Robert Adams said, a photographer needs to photograph the past, the present, and the future in one shot. Thank you kindly. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Actually, this was an incredible presentation. I mean, I feel that way. I'm sure that many of us are sharing my thoughts right now. I have witnessed some part of your journey that you have presented us tonight, but I had never had the chance to have the whole in a package. So this was also enlightening for me. I am very lucky actually to have been a part of some of these, have some of those works, have my own copy of autographs.
You have visited the construction site.
And
you
I
have visited.
Yeah, the construction site, and I have been there for the press conference of your book.
Absolutely.
Which was actually the beautiful thing I remember of that was your little daughter that climbed up your lap. I mean, she got bored, and during your speech, she climbed up the stage, and that was beautiful, a beautiful scene. I have photos of that as well. So it was a pleasure for me to have you here and listen to your work again with all my friends, all our friends here. Okay, so
can I have a glass of water, please?
Of course.
Thank
you. For you, I mean, you have to be tired. Okay, so thank you very much again for the audience as well. Let's prepare for questions. I mean, are there any of you who would like to ask questions to Mr. Yerolymbos? I think, I mean, this time you can open up your microphones by yourselves and ask in person, or if you would like to write down your questions, you can write it on the chat box. I see that there are many people that are actually thanking you and thinking that was wonderful. Right now, among the audience, I have many colleagues of Yıldız Technical University. Our Dean of Faculty of Architecture is here. And our professors, some of our professors, my researcher friends, students, as far as I can see. I mean, there is a nice group of people actually, and still, by the way. So, any questions? Would you like to ask something, or would you like to add something? Is there anyone who would like to do that?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, of course, please.
First of all, thank you for this event. I'm a teacher, I'm a mathematics teacher, and I'm interested in photography as well. And thank you very much for your speech and, showing the photographs. My question was, have you ever come to Istanbul to photograph?
That's a very sad story. That's a very sad. Pinar and I had planned a great project. So we went and did what the French call a repérage. We went around Istanbul and started mapping, similar to Athens, for example. We started mapping how we could get access to places in order to create a portfolio, maybe make a book together. Pinar would write the text, I would provide the photographs, and we would have a joint portfolio of this. Unfortunately, a number of things happened. I wouldn't like to get into certain parts, but the Greek crisis was certainly one of them. That was a shock for us. And therefore, many projects like this were put on hold. I have to say, there is no Greek who doesn't just adore Istanbul. There's none. I have never met any of my compatriots who don't really like the city or love it. And if and when the opportunity arises, it would be brilliant to be there again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I hope so, because that was a project that I was very.
That was a good one.
Yeah, I was excited about, because afterwards, after you came and after we have traveled through the city, everything has changed so much. Actually, this was the plan to make notes of the change, right? But I don't know if the city can change more. I don't know right now.
Cities are vibrant, ever-changing.
Yeah, but the change between those years was dramatic, and yeah. I wish we could record that. So.
But that's the thing. That's what amazes me. And again, I don't want to steal phrases. It's against the law when you have when you are doing a PhD thesis. I can't remember who said. Maybe you can all help me. Was it Frampton, Kenneth Frampton, who said that architecture is the petrification of social conditions. Athens forever will be the 1960s and 70s. In 2 or 3 centuries from now, people will visit Athens to see, the beauty of the 20th century. I think that Istanbul has far more layers. Yeah. Of course it does, due to its size, its importance geographically, historically, religiously, everything. So I'm sure that it is working in Istanbul can be quite dense and very, very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, well, there is another question, Osman Doğan. If you would like to ask yourself, it's also okay, but I can read it as well. So, how were you able to center the construction photos from above. So
level.
yeah.
Wow, that's a good one. He must be a colleague. Actually, I work with a very specialized equipment, a very special architecture camera, which on it has 4 spirit levels. And therefore, with my eye on the on the eyepiece and the other looking at the camera, I was always able to level it and be able to have a parallel, basically a zero perspective point of view. I mean, the soil and my camera were completely parallel. There was no angle between them. People actually mistake it by saying it is a bird's eye view. It's not. Bird's eye view means 45 degrees. There is an angle. I did a very parallel to the soil, and thus I titled the portfolio Orthographs, because orthographs is what Leon Battista Alberti titled this kind of drawings, architectural drawings. So it was, a fair comment and how should I say, an honor for me to use Alberti's title. But that's the way, parallel to the soil, and then the person, the crane operator would turn the crane around and around and around for me to be satisfied. Again, I'm saying they were friends. They were really good friends. No one was, coerced to do so, or no one had to. They could, deny, but they all did. No one ever denied during 10 years, and I think that's one of the things that I will remember.
I remember a photo of you actually on the crane, lying lying on the crane and taking your photos, and that was actually really frightening to imagine, to be there and to look down. I mean, didn't you have any hate problems?
Hate? Sorry?
So the fear of hate or something?
Oh yes, absolutely. Oh yes. But Pinar, you have to remember, and we are in a very strange situation right now with politically correctness, and I don't want to get into trouble. Mm-hmm. But a construction site is basically, a place where many boys play with instruments and have the exact same mentality of a 15 or 13 or 6-year-old boy. So you have to save face. Yeah. I was constantly having a problem with height, but people, friends of mine on the ground, betted, no, he will have a problem this time, or he won't. And I didn't want to lose this game, so I had to, to suck it in, and I had a plastic bag with me in case. But again and again and again, you get used to it. The beginning is the problem, and as I said, you just need not to think about it. It's like it's a boys thing, and you don't want to lose the respect of the person next to you.
Yeah. Okay. So another question from a colleague of mine, Celine, is asking, what's your opinion about the difference between shooting with a drone and climbing and shooting the whole environment from above?
Great question. Thank you so much.
Experiencing that.
There is a world apart. A world apart. And the I am a certified drone pilot. Okay. Now, I mean, I have my license, and I flew in Athens a few days ago with the FAA approvals and everything, all the necessary safety measures and so on and so forth. So I'm both. I've done both. Mm-hmm. And again, it might sound strange, but the analogy is like the military use of a drone. There are the first drones in this world were military ones. Mm-hmm. It is completely different to be in a metal box in Nevada and press a button executing something in the other side of the world than to physically be there as a pilot.
Mhm.
You take different decisions because you are physically there. Me being up there decided completely different photographs than me being, in safety on a ground, completely different point of view. And honestly, there is a technical aspect of it, which is batteries. A drone can fly for 27 minutes. If you need to take off and land, half of it is this procedure, and therefore you have something like 12, 13 minutes. Certain photographs of the ones that I have shown you, I was there for 3 hours up there, 3 hours. I waited for something to happen. I could see with my eyes that this was not a bush. In a drone, you'll just take the photograph, and whether it's a bush or a person, you will figure it out later in the computer. When you are up there, you see whether it is a bush or a person, and therefore you wait for it. There's a huge difference in shooting between the two methods. I do both. I look down on none, but they are different.
Mhm. Okay, yeah. I mean, yeah. So for the light, for example, you can wait a few more minutes, etc. But with the drone, you have to stop and replan it, etc. Probably. That was an interesting question as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, any other questions you could ask in person or write it down here? Or any other contributions you would like to share with us? You were so crystal clear with everything, my dear friend.
I hope so.
And
I highly value your honoring invitation, and as you said, it would be brilliant to being able to have done it in Istanbul.
yeah. I mean, I am sure that there are people here that would love to meet you in person at the conference while we were chatting in front of the conference hall, etc. So ask their questions to you in person, probably. But
Yeah, I was this type of guy as well. It took me some minutes to have a question, and I totally get it. I understand. Not to worry, please, not worry.
Okay, so Defne Bozkurt, again, a colleague of mine, she would like to ask a question.
Hi, hello.
Hi.
Good evening. Thank you very much for the presentation. It was wonderful. And there are so many aspects to it. So I could ask many questions, but the one thing I really wonder what you're going to do after this, because you know how you had the depth and the large landscapes as a perspective or from a horizontal positioning, let's say, but in the last set of the project that you were talking about, all the pictures from the crane, so from above and looking down from a large vertical distance. So after this, how are you going to go forward to satisfy this need? I think, I mean, unless we go into this drone, whatever technology, I don't know where it's going to take us, but
neither do I.
Projections.
Neither do I. That's an excellent question as well, and it's a deep one. Honestly, I think that I will go closer. I think that I will start approaching. We have similar kind of buildings. We live in similar built environments, and I'm always amazed by the patchwork of all the balconies and the different lives. You know, the students and the young couple with a baby, and the grandmother who is by herself, and all of this in one building.
You already started having that in those photographs of Athens you showed us, the compositions of, you know, three
Yes.
rows and 10, 3.
Yes,
30,
I think that my gut tells me that I will start going closer and finding this kind of environment. we'll see. Honestly, I think that's the path I'm going to take. Cranes, no. If I have 2 children now, enough. I was lucky. Okay, I'm not pushing it. I'm not pushing it.
Okay, good luck.
Thank you. You too. Thank you for your question. Thank you so much.
Okay, another question from me. Is there any ongoing project right now? Because, okay, we have that extraordinary situation here on the world, and how about your work? What are your plans, the short-term plans, let's say? Daphne was asking about the long-term plans maybe, but is there anything ongoing project right now?
I'm afraid that as they say, I'm in the drawing board. Meaning that what I'm doing sketches right now. I'm trying to find how I will set up all these new landscapes that we have just discussed. You know, the honest answer is that being a photographer, it means that you know it demands physical presence and a voyage, a trip. And with the quarantine since March, we are in the bridge of financial collapse. So my priority is to take assignments and get commissions and try to you know to pay the bills. I was very, very honored to be chosen by the Museum of Louvre in Abu Dhabi by Jean Nouvel, Atelier Jean Nouvel, to photograph for their new book, the official book. I am the official photographer, and we have signed a contract. The first trip was in March. There was no trip in March, and we had rescheduled for November. November came and gone, so nobody knows. You know, it's one of my profession is one that cannot be done through a computer. You need to actually be there. So you know that's a tricky situation, and my wife and I we try to find a way to tackle this. Otherwise, we will be in trouble.
But still, we hope that this will also come to a realization point, so that you can.
Absolutely. I would love to.
So exciting that Jean Nouvel. Ah, Deniz Hoca, son anda geldin. Still people coming in, but actually we are at the end of our at the end of our session. So is there anyone else who would like to say?
Don't push them.
As well, that's also okay. We have common friends here as well, by the way. Begum was here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so and also yeah, a lot of friends that you have met here were here tonight to be a part of this. So if there, I mean, for the last chance, is there any other questions you would like to ask to our guests? Which, I mean, well, as we have Zoom, we can actually have those kinds of seminars more common, more often, and that would be nice. But still, for tonight, I mean, it was an exciting night for me. This was incredible. Deniz Hocam, Deniz Erinsel Önder, a professor of architecture. She is also here. Deniz Hocam.
Ben buradayım. Tüm konferansı izledim. Diğer Deniz Hoca yeni gelmiş olabilir. Pınar.
Yok hocam, siz mikrofonu açınca ben bir şey söyleyeceğim.
Öyle mi? Pardon. Ben elimdeymiş. Tamam. Thank you very much. Çok teşekkür ediyorum her şey için. Harikaydı. It was incredible.
Teşekkür ederiz. So I am trying to follow who's opening up their microphones, etc. So that's why I have made a mistake. So, peki, okay then. Thank you very much again, my dear friend. It was an honor to have you here.
The honor was mine. Thank you so much.
And I hope that we can do it in person as well. We would love to have you in our university and have this meeting in person. So I'm sure that it was an inspiring evening for a lot of people here. Thank you very much for joining us, to everybody. And so I can close the session down then. Thank you very much, Yiorgis.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay. And now I have to end it, right? Okay. Okay. So see you again. Bye-bye.